I'm Penelope Harris. I do hematology oncology here at Madigan. We're going to do, as Einstein says, make everything as simple as possible, but no simpler. We're going to do the Clotting Coagulation Cascade, and we're going to make it simple to where about 5 minutes from now you can remember how to do it yourself. Okay, we're going to have, I'll give you a head start. We're going to start with 12, okay? 12 ends in the letter E. Our next number is going to be 11. 11 ends in the letter N. Our next number is 9. 9 ends in the letter E. Our next number is 8. 8 ends in the number T. Our next number is 10. And then we have a wee bit of rote memorization here. 10, 5, 2, 1. 10, 5, 2, and 1. And our only number we haven't used yet so far between 1 through 12, well, at least the only number that we need here, maybe we haven't used 3, is 7. We're going to put 7 over here. Okay, so this is the coagulation cascade. This is very simple. You can remember this anytime. This is the PTT, our activated partial thromboplastin time, measures our intrinsic pathway over here. This is our PT-INR that measures our extrinsic pathway. Now, tissue factor comes from platelets and thrombogenic stuff in our veins, and tissue factor is extrinsic to this pathway. That's where you get the name extrinsic. And we have 10-ACE, which helps break down 10, is intrinsic to this pathway. That's where they get their names. Partial thromboplastin uses only partial thromboplastins, which come from platelets. This uses full thromboplastins, but the prothrombin time, it just basically measures, from getting prothrombin down to thrombin, which is activated 2A. It just measures this. Now, we also have a little bit more that we can add to this, although this is the basics that I want you to remember. So factor 1 is fibrinogen. And fibrinogen gets broken down into fibrin monomers. And then fibrin monomers join together to make fibrin polymers. And then we have factor 13, which hasn't been used yet. Factor 13 comes in and covalently bonds this clot to make it a stabilized clot. So we have a stabilized clot down here. So if you're measuring your PT-PTT, it stops here. Factor 13 is not measured. So if you're a bleeder, but you have a factor 13 deficiency, your coags may be normal. Your coags would be normal. If you have a deficiency of any of these, which we can remember this easily, this is hemophilia A, hemophilia B, and hemophilia C, if you're low in either factor 8, 9, or 11. If you have a deficiency of any of these, then your PTT will be prolonged. However, we also have some high molecular weight kininogen and prekallikrein and contact factors and stuff up here. These guys, if you are low in these, your PTT will be prolonged, but you don't bleed because our clotting pathway predominantly starts down here from 9 and 7 down. So if you have a prolonged PTT but you don't bleed, it could be factor 12 deficiency. And if you have normal coags but you do bleed, it could be factor 13 deficiency. Now if you have low any of these deficiencies or inhibitors, your PTT will be prolonged. If you have a deficiency or an inhibitor of factor 7, now remember Coumadin is a great deficiency of factor 7. It gets down our 2, 7, 9, and 10 and protein C and S. So your PT will be prolonged if you have a deficiency or an inhibitor to factor 7. And if you have a deficiency or an inhibitor of these, then since this is a measure of both your intrinsic and extrinsic pathway, both of them will be prolonged if you have a deficiency or an inhibitor of these guys. So there's a couple other things that we're going to use our notes just to remember to tell you about. So clots, they're initiated either here or here. And then by tissue factor and factor 7 binding, or by factor, right here, or by factor 9 being activated. Now, when this happens, you start going down the pathway to make this thrombin to prothrombin, fibrinogen, down to our clot. Once we have thrombin right here, this helps propagate our clot right here, okay? So we have clot initiation, and then clot amplification by thrombin coming back up here to amplify our clot, and then as procoagulant things are released from our platelets, the clot is propagated. Okay, so we have Fibrinogen split products or fibrinogen degradation products come out here as our fibrinogen is being broken down. We measure this in deep DIC, an increase of fibrinolysis. We have our D-dimer come off down here as our clot's being stabilized. Again, a marker of intravascular coagulation. Where does our anticoagulants work? Okay, heparin, it inhibits thrombin. It binds to antithrombin and inhibits thrombin right here. So this is where heparin works. Heparin also does a little bit of anti-10A activity, but it's more antithrombin. And heparin also does a little bit of some of these guys of 9, 10, 11, and 12. So this is why your PTT is prolonged when you have heparin. So we're going to talk a little bit more about heparin. So it's a long molecule with a little pentasaccharide here that binds antithrombin. And then low molecular weight heparin is shorter. It still has this little pentasaccharide that binds antithrombin. And these each, when bound, can inhibit factor 10A, which works right here. So we think predominantly our low molecular weight heparin works predominantly here. We can measure that with an anti-10A, and heparin works a little bit there. Now, heparin is long enough so that it can also take antithrombin, which also can bind thrombin and inactivate it, and it wraps around it. Now, low molecular weight heparin is too short to wrap around to this thrombin as well, so it predominantly works here at inactivating 10A. So we have some of the newer direct thrombin antagonists, like our dabigatran or the IV argatroban. They are thrombin inhibitors. They work here also to inhibit the thrombin. Now, I'll tell you, heparin, if it's binding, inhibiting your thrombin, it makes your thrombin inhibition 1,000 to 4,000 times more strong than your natural in vivo thrombin inhibition. So it's very, very big for anticoagulation in the thrombin pathway. And then you also have Fondaparinux, which is this little tiny pentasaccharide. It works here at inhibiting 10A. Dinaparoid, a heparinoid, also works here. And I think Coumadin, we know Coumadin, it decreases our 2, 7, 9, and 10. Predominantly these guys more than this one. If your Coumadin is on high enough levels, you'll get both of these out, but predominantly with Coumadin, certainly therapeutic and maybe mildly super therapeutic anticoagulation, just your INR is going to be out. Predominantly this factor 7, which is more sensitive to Coumadin. Okay, thank you.